Católica de Chile community congregating this morning to collaboratively build our university strategic plan for the next 5 years. Our initial session is very special this year. We have with us important representatives and friends from the education and academic world. And during the next 2 hours, we will have the opportunity to listen to their experiences during this COVID situation, as well as their ideas and thoughts about how to build a better future. I will first introduce our speakers for this international seminar. Professor Ignacio Sánchez, Rector at Pontificia Universidad Católica de Chile, will start introducing this international seminar. He will be followed by Professor Gary May, Chancellor of the University of California, Davis. Then Professor Barbara Redmond, Provost for Universitas 21, will share her ideas. Subsequently, Father John Jenkins, President of the University of Notre Dame, will continue the seminar. And finally, Mr. Peter Wells, Chief of Higher Education at UNESCO, will share his world views of university education. In the name of the PUC community, we deeply thank you for taking the time to be with us this morning. Each of you will have 10 minutes for individual presentations, followed by a session of questions and answers. I ask the PUC audience to please write your questions in the chat section. Please, Rector Sanchez, if you may start with the first presentation.
Thank you, Professor Ferrer. And I, again, would like to thank all our guests that are coming from UC Davis, Chancellor Gary May, from Notre Dame, President John Jenkins. Father Jenkins, thank you so much for being here. From Universitas 21, the current provost, Barbara Redmond, who is our leader in Universitas 21 that is joining us to work as a network. And Mr. Peter Wells is the Director of Higher Education of UNESCO. I would like to thank Peter, and also Paz Portales, who is a distinguished Chilean professor working in UNESCO as well. So we have 4 different views from different parts of the world, and personalities that are going to discuss with us how has been the pandemic in different areas of the world, and also in different scopes and views. I guess it's very important for us to present as well as a formal presentation our new Vice President for International Affairs, Professor Lydia Ferrer, who is starting in March, working with different pairs like Joanna Regulska from UC Davis, Mike Pippinger from Notre Dame, and different part of the world. So this is a unique opportunity to launch our vice presidency as well in this seminar. In this less than 10 minutes that I'm going to take, I would like just to open the discussion. The pandemic for coronavirus in Chile started really in March, so it has been almost 5 months or a little bit more of online teaching, online work for our staff, for our professors, for our students. And we have learned so much from this situation. We were prepared a little bit for starting this in March. The situation that we live in Chile last year with some social crisis started to put on the table the necessity to be prepared for online work at the university. So that gave us some impulse to start with this with these initiatives that we really put on action. I would say the 12th of March, when we decided to change our presential teaching and work to online and distance work. For the past 4 months, and we already finished our first semester, I will say that the evaluation is excellent. We have a very good group of students that they gave us the best effort to accomplish all the goals. And also, I would like to congratulate our group of professors and the teaching that they did was very close to the students with company, with understanding, with flexibility, with collaboration. That was a great experience. Last Monday, we started with the second semester that is going to be almost completely online. We are going to focus in practical activities. We're going to focus on research activities. We're going to focus on our freshman students and also the ones that are finishing the contents to have some presential activities starting probably in October, depending on the sanitary situation of the country. The second area that we learned so much has been the research activities. I will say that in Chile, at least, we have been working as a group of universities focusing on the pandemic. Our university, along with the University of Chile, has been working in a group, in a collaborative group with majors, with the Minister of Health, with the Minister of Science, with authorities of the government, with a medical college, trying to give some answers to the necessities of the society. And the answers were coming from the university, considering our group of researchers in different fields. I would like to mention some projects that we have been working on in relation to new ventilators, in relation to protection for our health group, in relation to testing, the phase 3 of a new vaccine in the country, but not only in biomedical or technological fields, but also new guidelines in education, new guidelines on economy, in ethical fields, in a company for the families and this very sick patients, the one that died, and how to accompany the family in their pain and in the sorries that they have. Also, I would like to make a point on our staff, professionals and administrative groups that has been working at home and really in a sense of a network, in a sense of collaboration. It's very hard, the work at home, considering the family needs that we have to take care, consider the children, consider all the member of the families that many of our professionals and administrative have to take care of. In summary, I will say that the pandemic for us as a Catholic university in Chile has some keywords that has been on the table every day. One is collaboration. Second one is flexibility. Third one is empathy. Fourth one is understanding. And all of that, I guess we have to be very flexible and very keen on using because every day we have to be we have to accommodate our decisions to the reality and to the experiences that the persons has been having. In all this, our Vice Presidency for International Affairs has been very active. I would like to mention the work that Lydia Ferrer has done with UNESCO, with U21. That's why I'm very happy to have you here. And for sure, from the States, Notre Dame and UC Davis are the more strong partners that we have. During all these years, UC Davis has been incorporated to U21, and with Notre Dame, we have a long-term relationship, not only in student exchange, but also in different academic and research projects, and we share the identity. So the presence of President Ferrer Jenkins and the presence of Chancellor May are very important for us in this seminar. I'm sure that we're going to have a very fruitful discussion, and I give the podium to Lillian for the first presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Rector Sanchez. And please, Chancellor May, if you could follow with your presentation.
Sure, thank you, Lillian. Good morning, everyone. I want to thank Rector Sanchez for inviting me to the presentation this morning. I'm very pleased to join other panelists, and I'm grateful for the ongoing partnership between our universities. The collaboration between UC Davis and Pontificia Universidad Católica de Chile has been very fruitful. Our faculties have collaborated on more than 70 publications in just the last 5 years. We have very important partnerships that will strengthen veterinary medicine and marine research, and longstanding collaborations in the field of history. I look forward to continuing this relationship and building on our shared foundation. In the midst of a global pandemic, collaboration and partnership are more important than ever. COVID-19 has touched almost every corner of the world and shows just how interconnected our world is. Local problems can quickly become global problems, and global problems have the potential to impact every community, every neighborhood, and every family. This pandemic has reaffirmed the need for global education, global connections, and collaborations across borders. In these unprecedented times, higher education can and should be a part of the solution. We have a shared global responsibility in higher education to fulfill our missions. At UC Davis, we have a tripartite mission of research, teaching, and public service, and all are critical now as we conduct groundbreaking research to combat this pandemic and other global challenges. We continue providing world-class education for our students remotely to ensure their safety and well-being. And we serve our communities through scholarship that's publicly engaged in fields from engineering and law to social science, and through our UC Davis health system. Higher education can also play a crucial role in mitigating some of the inequities that are exacerbated during pandemics. For example, we're seeing that African-American communities have higher mortality rates compared to other groups in the US. This pandemic has exposed not only our society's gaps in care, but also the deeply embedded social, cultural, and economic inequalities that lead to higher mortality in Black, Latinx, and Asian communities here. Academic leaders are in a unique position to address these issues. We do that by providing access, opportunity, and advancement for all. When it comes to a global pandemic and social justice, our institutions have the expertise to be a force for good. We need to prepare the next generation to thrive in an increasingly connected world. That includes helping students understand global challenges and inequalities. When they understand global systems and cultural diversity, students can take actions to create a more equitable and peaceful world. That's why UC Davis is working to provide a global education component for all students. We call it Global Education for All. It aims to provide all students with international or intercultural experiences. For example, several of our students recently completed a remote internship with Team for Tech, a nonprofit that does education and technology work in East Africa. They worked with youth in Rwanda and Malawi. They mentored girls in STEM projects and applying for college. At UC Davis, we are focusing closely on hybrid or fully online global programs, online global leadership workshops, and more global skill-based certificates. The COVID-19 pandemic has significantly impacted how we operate, but it's also bringing out the best in our unique strengths of innovation and collaboration. Of course, the abrupt transition to a remote learning environment was a challenge for faculty and students alike, but one of the positive things to emerge from this shift is how it's prompted deeper conversations about how courses are structured and evaluated. This is a great opportunity to look at what and how we're teaching, and to consider if our age-old models are still relevant. It's an opportunity to respond to the demand for new skills and knowledge needed in the future workplace and in the global economy. We focused on supporting students to ensure they have everything they need to be successful in a remote environment. We created a laptop loaner program for students in need. We also made safe, socially distanced spaces with Wi-Fi connections available on campus. I'm really proud of the leadership that UC Davis has shown during this public health crisis. UC Davis Health treated the first case of COVID-19 that was acquired from community spread in the US. As a result, UC Davis Health was instrumental in prompting the Centers for Disease Control to change testing protocols. We have researchers from a wide variety of disciplines coming together. Our schools of medicine, veterinary medicine, and the Center for Immunology and Infectious Diseases are collaborating to make breakthroughs in vaccines and diagnostic testing. Our College of Engineering is working with the School of Medicine researchers to produce ventilators and 3D print test swabs. We have communication experts analyzing millions of social media posts to identify emerging outbreaks. And these are just a few examples. Now let's turn our attention to the future and how we're planning in an uncertain environment. When it comes to campus planning, flexibility is essential. UC Davis has developed a 4-phase plan for returning to campus. This allows us to ramp up or scale back depending on public health guidance. For fall quarter, most courses will be offered remotely. That includes all classes with 50 or more students. We are coordinating to ensure our international students can continue their studies where they live on or off campus. As a top public research university, we have many courses, labs, and research activities that cannot be offered remotely. So we have detailed guidelines for returning to in-person classes and activities. Next, we need to look for opportunities to address new challenges. We can't lose ground in serving underrepresented students and promoting social mobility. COVID-19 impacts our most vulnerable students. We must ensure that remote instruction practices did not put these students at greater disadvantage in terms of degree completion, time to degree, and GPA outcomes. Remote instruction must be accessible and inclusive. To bridge the digital divide, we need to provide adequate resources and technology to support student success. Beyond campus, the pandemic has had devastating impact on the economy. Graduates of the class of 2020 thought they would enter a US labor market with 4% unemployment. Instead, that number has soared to 20%. Our students are learning about global health, global systems, global inequalities in real time. Students are seeing their fields and future careers in these global contexts. We need to find new ways to ensure students are active participants in tackling local and global challenges through research experiences, internships, community engaged projects, and entrepreneurial competitions. This is an important part of preparing students for the global workforce. In times of crisis, collaboration is more important than ever. That includes working with government, business, community organizations, and community members. And I'll just share 2 examples. First, we announced last week that we're participating in clinical trials that are part of a global effort. UC Davis Health is one of just 120 sites worldwide to partner with Pfizer and BioNTech on the development of a COVID-19 vaccine candidate. Second, we are connecting our campus community with the world virtually. UC Davis held the first of several COVID-19 symposia in April. These online events featured speakers and experts in such fields as infectious diseases and emergency medicine, as well as public health officers and elected officials. More than 1,100 people attended from throughout the US and Canada, as well as Germany, Brazil, France, Indonesia, and India. These events were organized by Walter Lell, a distinguished professor of molecular and cellular biology, who was originally from Brazil himself. Now, let me wrap up with this. We are all facing this pandemic wherever we are in the world. We can learn from one another and improve our responses by sharing and collaborating across borders. Our well-being relies on this interdependence. With that, I'm happy to continue this discussion and take any questions and answers during that portion of the event. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you, Chancellor May. We really appreciate your opinion and sharing your experiences and what comes to vivid from your perspective and Rector Sanchez's perspective is this flexibility and this need to mobilize ourselves into a different direction so we can actually confront global challenges nowadays. So now we would like Professor Ferrer Redmond to continue with her presentation from Universitas 21.
Thank you, Lillian. And good afternoon from Ireland to all those familiar faces I see there, Pedro and Diego and Miriam and Lillian and Ignacio, and also Chancellor May and Joanna from UC Davis. I'm going to use a small slideshow here, which I hope will work for you. Is that okay?
Yes.
Okay. And I really want to use this just to illustrate some of my thoughts about the questions that you put to us. U21 is an international universities network. We have 27 research intensive universities from across the world. We have universities in 18 countries, and we have over 1 million students and over 250,000 staff in those institutions. So it's on that basis that I'm going to speak briefly to you today. Thinking about what our members are telling us at the moment about what are their most immediate concerns, certainly the uncertainty of the COVID-19 virus, and particularly its very uncertain trajectory and pattern, that it's not going to be a start and finish, and the great worries that people have about the direction that the virus is going to take. As already mentioned by Ignacio and Chancellor May, how best to teach students, the need for students to be able to be together as much as possible and yet to use the best in online technology. How to keep research active. And I think one of the things that our members are telling us very strongly is the concerns they have at the moment, particularly for doctoral students and postdoctoral students. And those at the very start of their academic careers, because the lack of any travel is really impacting on them, and to how we keep them engaged and how we give them a really good and fruitful research career. How to deal with financial cuts. I think that is so strong for so many of our members. Chancellor May has been talking about the huge spike in unemployment rates, but also our members are facing added challenges with much less money than they had 12 months ago. And the last part is dealing with staff and student resilience, how our staff and our students are coping at the moment. A thing to perhaps remember is that there are definite psychological phases in coping with a crisis. The first being that emergency phase of shared goals. And I think when the presidents of U21 came together recently, they talked about the actual energized feeling that staff went into the initial weeks and months of the pandemic, of feeling that they had solidarity and they were very focused and productive. And the almost inevitable second phase of regression, where the future looks more uncertain and where people begin to lose a sense of purpose. And I think we've all experienced the tiredness, the irritability and the worry that comes with that phase. And the final phase is recovery from a crisis. And that's when people begin to reorientate, revise expectations and goals and move forward. I think the really worrying part of the way the COVID pandemic is working is that the uncertainty about how the virus is progressing can almost create a circle from phase 3 back into a phase 2 and back into a phase 3 again. And I think we need to be aware of this in terms of the well-being of our staff and the well-being of our students. and recognizing times when they need support and help. And I think Chancellor May has spoken particularly about students who need extra support and extra help, but that worry when they do go back into that second phase of how we can support them through it, and also remembering our staff go through it as well. What U21 has tried to do for our members in 2020, this kind of immediate response, is we've run quite a number of what we've been calling our open houses. And this was just bringing together similar groups across the network to share experiences. We've had the presidents, we've had heads of research, heads of education, heads of mobility and international. We've had the individuals on campuses who deal with the actual management of the campus. And we were very assisted by our Chinese colleagues in that, who are about 3 or 4 months ahead of us on how best to deep cleanse the university before students came back. We've also put back most of the money we would have used in travel and in overseas events immediately into members' universities in small education and research grants. In the next 2 months, we're going to offer up to 2,000 free student places on a virtual mobility course, which will allow students who are not going to be able to use UC Davis talk about internationalization for all. We hope this will assist where students cannot physically leave their campus, that we're able to bring them together virtually across the U21 network. And we're also funding staff leadership training. And I think what the presidents particularly are saying to us is the recognition of the very fine leadership that has emerged in their universities during these very hard times. Looking towards the future, our members are talking to us about what their worry is for the next 5 years. The uncertainty about the COVID-19 virus is still there. And certainly this is going to be a pandemic that is not going to leave us anytime soon, and is likely to be in our lives for months and for years to come. Also, international relationship, what is happening in the world in general, where uncertainties in the world and worrying leadership in the world is how that is developing and how that impacts, particularly on higher education. National politics, how our own governments are supporting our universities, how they're recognizing higher education, and particularly in the degree of investment that they're placing into universities. In U21 for the past 10 years, we've been ranking national systems of higher education. And one of the things we've learned from that is that underinvestment in universities and also micromanagement of universities create a really devastating impact on what universities can achieve. And finally, ensuring belief and trust in universities. And I think if one thing has happened about COVID-19, it is the increase in the respect for science. And I think we were going into a phase where almost personal opinion was viewed on a par with deep and robust scientific research, that people are beginning to really appreciate the real importance of science and of research. I'm going to share a number of points that were drawn up by the U21 educational leaders at their meeting last November at the University of Johannesburg. Interestingly, before the COVID-19 had ever been heard of. And they were talking about the challenge to all of them across the world, from particularly artificial intelligence and the fourth industrial revolution. But it's interesting now on the far side of the outbreak of the pandemic to look at what they've said. They said, vigorously defend the research intensive university status as a trusted knowledge provider. And we've just spoken about that. To draw on multidisciplinary research expertise to engage students and staff to understand and address the world's grand challenges, to embrace new models of micro-distributed, extended and just-in-time learning. And I think that this change in really looking at how we deliver education, particularly in small batches, in micro-credentials, in working with industry as co-educational providers, is ways we can really think of enhancing and transforming the way we teach students. To also, and this was an interesting thing, to rethink the traditional economic model of a research intensive university before alternative models are imposed on universities. And one of the things that in what seems like a different planet ago in November 2019 was the importance of universities really not being able to have the autonomy to guide their own future. This is going to be more difficult as universities become more dependent on national funding, but being able to think of the best financial models, particularly for research intensive universities, and also to think of staffing models to meet the new challenges and to provide career-long professional training for staff, for both professional staff and academic staff, to cope with what comes ahead. Looking into the future, I'm going to share perhaps what is a quote I'm very fond of, and it's from H.L. Mencken. And it says, "To every complex problem, there is an answer that is clear, simple, and wrong." And there is going to be no easy answer in the next 5 years. And I'm going back to what the Rector and Chancellor May talked about, the importance of flexibility, of collaboration, of empathy and understanding. I think what has got me through the last few months is occasionally reminding myself that I need the serenity to accept things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And that has certainly helped me in my dark and irritable days. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today.
Thank you, Professor Redmond. It's very inspiring what you just said. And again, we find this human aspect of COVID, during these times, how important it is to be flexible, to be close to the people, to really be aware of what's going on and be aware of the needs that each of our universities needs to get involved with. So thank you very much, Dr. Redmond. And Father Jenkins, please, if you may. Father Jenkins, your microphone.
Yes, clumsy Zoom management here by me. I'm sorry. But I'm honored to be part of this. As you know, we have a long and deep relationship with UC, and just very happy to be here with Rector Sanchez and with all of you. It's great to join you for this interesting conversation. I want to recognize my colleague, Michael Pippinger, our Vice President for Internationalization, who is on this call and works very closely with many universities around the world. One of the casualties of this pandemic has been our ability to send students to various sites around the world, and it's a real impoverishment of our education here and the richness of our university, and we hope to continue that before long. I really appreciated the three presentations of Rector Sanchez, Chancellor May, and Provost Redmond, and they gave a very wonderful, comprehensive view of the challenges we face. I'm gonna mine will perhaps be a little more just reflections on some general themes, which may or may not be helpful to you as you think about the next decade or so. I think it's fair to say, as it has been said, that the effects of the pandemic on higher education has affected just about every aspect of it. Classroom instruction, the logistics of housing and dining for students, finances, of course, as has been mentioned, short-term plans. So I think we're all trying to work through this as we go along. And I certainly don't have answers, just a few reflections on it. You know, for the past week, we've had our students back in large numbers, and many universities have not done that. We've done it, and it's extraordinarily difficult. I'll say that. I'm not sure we'll be successful. Young people are not as compliant as I'm sure you all know, working at universities. But they're happy to be back and happy to be here, and we hope we'll be able to leverage that, but we'll continue to work toward that. I just want to echo again what was said about the impact of finances. Mental health is a big issue, career opportunities. The reason, one of our major reasons for bringing our students back, which I'll talk about a little more later, was this sense of community that I think is critical to the vitality of a university as an intellectual community, a community of learning and inquiry. And more than that, sort of a community that engages us personally. I think that's very important, and one of the most unfortunate consequences of this pandemic is to drive us apart a little bit necessarily to avoid the spread. And that is, that's a challenge. So we continue to work against that. You know, one might think that, that we will eventually find a vaccine here and get back to the status quo ante, and things will go on as usual. I'm not sure anybody here believes that, but it's a plausible view, one might argue. I'm just not sure. I find it very difficult to look into the future in this current situation, and that's a question that I'm thinking a lot about. I don't have an answer to it, but just want to throw out some thoughts for your consideration. One thing I'm seeing, and it has been mentioned by the speakers before, is there's sort of major impacts to societies. I'm speaking about the United States because that's what we know, and Chancellor May touched on some of these aspects, but the real problems and inequities in healthcare delivery in this country. And that is being shown, and a lot of the differences have to do with differences in race, socioeconomic class, and various other differences. The inequities of race have been brought up in dramatic terms in this country, and have had impact. And I think we're all trying to respond to that. I know we are at Notre Dame, but I think across the country, we're trying to respond to that. I mean, this is not a political statement, but this dysfunction of our federal government in this country, that's not against Republicans or Democrats, but it's pretty clear that the response in this country has been subpar, and that perhaps has to do with current office holders, but it perhaps has to do with some deeper political issues in this country. And it may lead to kind of a realignment of major political parties in the United States. The globalization of business has been impacted. I don't think it will completely undermine it, but it's caused rethinking on various in various ways. Certainly, as has been mentioned, there are kind of international tensions, and particularly between my country, the United States, and China, have been exacerbated, which is a worrying thing among the two largest economic powers. Why do I mention these? I think these are just some of the trends, some of the effects of this pandemic, and it's really hard to say how this is going to play out. It's really hard to say how the longer term effects this is going to have on our political life, our economic life, our social life, issues of justice. I don't know, and that's why I find it particularly difficult to plan. It's not simply the uncertainty of the pandemic, which that's part of it. How long is this going to last, and when we might be back to some version of normal, but also what impact will it have in other areas of our common life, and how will that impact universities? I have to say, I just don't know. And that is, it's something I think about, and I wish I had a kind of crisp and clear and persuasive answer for you, but I don't. And I think any attempt to think about the next few years will have to take that uncertainty into account. Let me just say something about higher education specifically, and it's something I've been thinking about. You know, as has been said, I think this pandemic has forced us to exploit remote learning and remote interactions in a more robust way. We've done that here at my universities. I'm sure across these universities that has been done. There's some received wisdom in this country, or maybe it's not received wisdom, but it's a prominent view, certainly popular in the press, that what this will lead to is a sort of breakdown of traditional universities, that they will be replaced by some version of online delivery organizations, whatever they will be, and that will replace what we traditionally see as a university, more economical, maybe efficient in certain ways, overcomes the difficulty of gathering. You know, and I guess I would offer a somewhat dissenting voice on that. I'm just struck in this current time of social distancing, a profound yearning for community. I see that among our students, I see that among our faculty, I see that in society. Part of the difficulty, the mental health difficulties we're all facing, and we're certainly facing that in this country. It's almost, there's an epidemic of mental health problems in this country. It's perhaps in part due to the uncertainty of the pandemic, economic impact, kind of the fragility of our life together. But I think it's also just this isolation that has particularly impact. There's a recent study by the CDC, particular impact on young people, 18 to 24 years old. I can't help but think that that's partly due to the isolation that is forced upon us. And I guess I would say, I just offer that it's simply ironically underscored the importance of the community that is, I think, at the heart of any vibrant university, people coming together to learn and to inquire. And it's, I think there may be an opportunity, ironically, to kind of reaffirm that. Certainly, remote learning tools are extremely valuable. They are here to stay. They will help us in many ways to instruct and to do research, et cetera, et cetera. But I can't help but believe that the current situation has underscored the importance of coming together as a community, of interacting on a personal level and a human level. And that really is why we at Notre Dame brought our students back to campus. It's a tremendous challenge. And as I said, I'm not sure, we may or may not be successful in this, but the excitement on our students' faces last week to be here, back here together, engaged in this enterprise of learning was truly palpable and rejuvenating, I think, for them and for all of us. And so perhaps, ironically, I guess this is what I want to offer, perhaps ironically, this pandemic can be a rediscovery of the value of community that is really at the heart of a vibrant university. So those are just some thoughts. I'll pause there, and I'm sure we'll have time for conversations later. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Father Jenkins. Again, your words are very inspiring, kind of going back to the basis and again, engaging in global challenges with this ironical opportunity for strengthening, again, the sense of community. I mean, it really is very inspiring. So, and now I would like to ask Peter Wells to talk to us from the perspective of UNESCO. Thank you, Peter, for being here with us.
Thank you very much, Lillian. Can everybody hear me?
Yes,
Oh,
perfect.
okay, great. Thank you so much for inviting me to join this discussion with such an eminent panel of experts. And I'm also here with my colleague Paz, who is there from UNESCO also. I don't have a speech prepared, but maybe what I would like to do is just share a few reflections from UNESCO's perspective, but also taking on board the very wise and very thoughtful conversations we've already heard during the panel discussion today. And just because Father Jenkins was the last to speak, maybe I can maybe reflect on that a bit. I think that we need to take the positive from this. Yes, the whole pandemic has turned out to be absolutely heartbreaking for many, many people, for many, many students, for many, many institutions. But I also firmly believe, and this is my personal opinion, that what we have gained from this, what the higher education community of institutions, of professors, of teachers and students, we have learned one very valuable lesson, and that is we can use technology to widen access. We can use technology to teach and learn online. Now, I understand that there has been globally, of course, from UNESCO's perspective, the digital divide is there and we need to approach that. But when we have opportunities now for students to learn remotely, students to learn at a distance or blended approaches, we also open up opportunities for those students who cannot learn online. So I really think the year 2020, which by definition should be 2020 vision, has actually started the year one for higher education. I think we are now at the point where we now realize that what many institutions, not just in Latin America, not in Chile, not only in the US, but globally, have previously thought impossible is now possible. So I am actually advocating this as a very positive step forward. I think there is now the opportunity to widen access to learners who previously couldn't physically be on campus, be it because of family reasons or work reasons or others, that they can access some form of higher learning. I also think that this is the start of universities genuinely being lifelong learning institutions, which means not just offering bachelor's, master's and doctorate degrees, but offering other types of higher level courses that they never did before because they didn't think they could. But now they know they can, and they've learned by virtue of necessity that they can do this. And I think this is a game changer for the future of the university. I hear the discussion from our panelists about the international mobility of students, and I am also concerned about that. I do think there is a value of the on-campus experience internationally for those who want to do it, and I think that is a danger that we will lose the momentum which we have garnished over the last 20 years of students traveling abroad, studying abroad, the intercultural dimension, which is one of the UNESCO's and the United Nations key drivers for building peace and understanding and working together. I don't believe that will end. I don't believe it's the end of international mobility. I don't believe it's the end of international research. I believe this is a blip, and it will change, and we will be able to move forward. But we've also proved during this, let's say, 6 to 9 month period that we can do international collaboration, teaching and learning programs, research. We can do it by Zoom. We can do it by Skype. We can do it online. This is what exactly we are doing right now. So I know there is angst, and I know there are people who are saying this is the end of higher education as we know it. But you know what? I think it should be the end of higher education as we know it, because we can change now. We can change and expand higher education access to people who never had it before. We can change the way our dynamics of programs are. We can change the courses we have. I was asked on an email today what to send my comments for the next 10 years of higher education, and this is what I will be sending to them. I think it is a game changer, and we need to look at it from the positive. I know there are negatives. I know there will be, the disruption is never easy, but I think we've reached a point where we can really change higher education for the better. Maybe I should stop there because I sound like I'm getting on my soapbox. Thank you.
No, thank you so much, Peter. And actually, it's really interesting how you are telling us, well, there is a need for change, and how ready are we for doing that? And that's always a challenge within an organization. So, as you could see in the chat, we have several questions from the audience, and it is really hard to organize them while I'm reading them. But I would like to start by asking you all your ideas in terms of which new emphasis or initiatives should we launch at our universities, very well-ranked universities, in terms to overcome inequities and social justice. That's one of the issues that have emerged in all of your presentations. So if each of you can touch bases on that, we would really appreciate. Maybe Chancellor May, if you can start. You were the first one who mentioned that.
Yeah, I'm happy to start. I think the issues of inequities have several dimensions and several aspects. I mean, the first obvious dimension was when we went to remote learning, just access, by all of our communities of students. So, that ranges from equipment access. So we provide laptops and equipment for students who in need, but also the learning environment. And when some students go home, their learning environment is not conducive to success. So is there sufficient Wi-Fi where they live and those sorts of things? So we found it necessary for us to provide those resources on the campus, even though the campus was not fully open. The second dimension is the health care dimension itself. Students from various disadvantaged backgrounds don't necessarily have access to testing needed for the virus, to vaccines and therapies that will develop. Are these going to be affordable as well as available for all communities? Telehealth, we find that telehealth is so important now when we are not able to reach each other physically, but do all communities have proper access and knowledge about telehealth. And finally, broadly, the economy. We talked briefly about the unemployment rate and small businesses struggling, and the need for government support, and all these things are magnified in some of our disadvantaged communities. And I think the role of the university here is threefold. One, the university must raise awareness about these issues, right? And let people know that these inequities exist. And then finally, in addition to that, suggest and recommend strategies, study the root causes of the inequities and recommend strategies for counteracting them, and be a liaison finally between the underserved communities and the resources that they need. So I think universities play a critical role in addressing the inequities that have been magnified by the virus. We have a saying here in the US, in the African American community, if America has a cold, Black people have the flu. And that's not only, it's not just a analogy here, it's actually true in this age of the pandemic. Everything that's happened with regard to the virus has been magnified in communities of color, and that we have to take note of that and figure out ways to address it.
If I could just follow up, I think that those were very perceptive remarks, and I just want to affirm one of the things, and we find the same thing. We went to remote learning last spring, and lower income students just they struggled. They struggled with Wi-Fi access. They struggled with their environment. They struggled in so many. They just had challenges that other students didn't have, and the same with race. I mean, race is another issue that Chancellor May mentioned about health. And you don't. And I guess this is what I want to say. You can't take education and view it in isolation from a host of other issues in our society that are affecting our students and are affecting our society. You have to see it connected with those. And we've learned that so in so many ways, so many times. You can put a lower income student at our university or another university and provide the tuition and provide the room and board, but that student still has needs that others don't. And those have to be addressed. In a sense, yeah, and in a sense, I take your point, Peter, about the opportunity for remote learning, and I do think it's an opportunity, and it certainly can give access to those who have not had it before. At the same time, that simply providing that access, perhaps in many cases, isn't enough. There's a sort of host of other issues that have to be addressed, and they're broader social issues. I wish I had an answer to that one, but it is something I think we grapple with here in very practical ways.
Thank you, Father Jenkins. Rector Sanchez?
Yeah, I guess inclusion, inequity, and lack of opportunities are in the center of this pandemic. As Chancellor May and President Jenkins were saying, we have to focus on the special needs of the students in regards to laptop connection, connectivity, in regards to internet access, etc. There's a big issue with gender, as well as race. Gender, it is an issue because, of course, female students, female professors, female staff, they have much work. All the queries are showing how much work they are combining between the home and the work at the university, the studies. So gender inequity, I guess, in pandemia is showing much significance than before. Also, students with special needs. We have a lot of programs for special needs in regards to mobility, in regards to acknowledgement of lacking in understanding for some particular students with disabilities on hearing, disabilities on a view. And in pandemia, because of the lack of access to all these programs, is for sure that the gaps are being broadened over time. If we are considering these gaps in higher education, perhaps we can consider for a minute what is happening in the schools and what is happening in the next freshmen and the next students that we're going to receive in the next year and the year before, the year after. So we have to put our focus as well in helping, in working together with the schools. In this sense, our educational faculty has been leading in Chile, analyzing how is the understanding of the students, how can we advise the professors, the teachers at school, how can we work together with the schools in regards to curriculum, in regards to views of giving the curriculum in pandemia. In summary, I guess socio-economical issues, gender issues, special needs, and the relationship with the schools are key factors in regards to inclusion and inequity. Thank you.
Thank you, Rector Sanchez. Maybe Bebre, yeah?
Hi, thank you. Yeah, I think I won't go over. I think a number of very important points have just been made there. Just to give you an example, there's inequity goes very deep into all our structures. In the United Kingdom, in the last 2 weeks, they have been trying to deal with predicting the grades of students who are not able to sit their end of high school examinations, on which most university places would be gained. And in doing so, they asked teachers to predict the grades they thought the students would achieve. And they ran this through an algorithm which actually advantaged better off schools, because they thought that students from more deprived areas would overestimate the abilities of students. So we now have a situation where an inequity has actually been deepened. And I mean, we're to do the same activity in Ireland in the next 2 weeks, and it'll be very interesting to see how much the Irish government has learned from the mistakes of our neighbours across the Irish Sea. But how we deal with really structural inequalities in our own nations that bring about inequality in higher education. I think in terms of the gender issue, it's also about the provision of good childcare on campus, of good creches, of students and staff being able to have reliable childcare that they can use so that women can come to work. One of the bad results of the pandemic is realizing that women at home are still doing 75% of the housework, in spite of the fact that their male partner may be also in the house with them. So it's how we get that kind of equity and we provide support, particularly for women. The other is not presuming we know about underserved communities, or that we know the best way to deal with that. And one example is in the University of Auckland, which is one of our members, that they have now put in an extremely good structure in dealing with the local Maori community, in having a professor of Maori studies as part of the university, but also in bringing more Maori students onto campus, and also to getting them to engage more in internationalization opportunities. It took a lot of conversations with the Maori community, particularly to allow young Maori women to become involved in these kind of activities. But rather than us presuming we know the answers, is really asking underserved communities. And finally, the notion of access is absolutely correct. In the University of Johannesburg, they discovered that once lockdown happened, their students again were going home to areas where they had no Wi-Fi, they didn't have enough equipment. So the University of Johannesburg reopened their campus and took students back into the campus so that they could access Wi-Fi and access equipment. I don't think I'm as optimistic as Peter is that now we have a brave new world for online education. We had very similar conversations in 2012 when MOOCs came online, that MOOCs were going to completely transform the way we would be able to broaden higher education, and they didn't work necessarily. And I think we have to think about, if we really want to increase access meaningfully, it has to be blended. It has to be in terms of reaching out and being in actual communication with our students as well as online. As I say, I think I grew more worried after the kind of results we saw, after all the bright new hope that was thought of in 2012, where we were apparently going to lose half of our universities because they weren't going to be necessary anymore and everything would go online, and the results of that.
Thank you, Barry. There is a question here that kind of relates with what we are talking. One of our faculty members asked the speakers if they see the current situation also as an opportunity to reinforce the discussion among our students and communities about the sense of life, the importance of resilience, of accepting that we can't control everything and that we need to learn to live with uncertainties, but have hope about the future. If you can comment on that.
You know, I'll just say, I said to our students that the most important thing they're going to learn this academic year is how to deal with those kinds of issues in their lives. You know, we just can't insulate them from all the problems of life, and rather it's to help them. It's a psychological issue. Excuse me for giving my profession. I think it's a spiritual issue. I mean, how you deal with hope in the midst of uncertainty and difficulty, how you respond. I do think that is not taught in a class, but it's perhaps the most important lesson young people are trying to learn, and we're all trying to learn with them. So I think it's a great question, and I hope we can help our students deal with those questions that will be with them for the rest of their lives.
Thank you, Father Jenkins. I don't know if another one of you would like to add to that. Yes, Peter.
Thank you very much, Lilian. You know what? I'd like to hear from somebody else in the room. I see a lot of people in this room. I would like to hear their comments to this question.
Please, if you, I don't see everybody in the screen at the same time, but if one of the attendees would like to raise your hand, I will be checking.
Lilian?
I see a lot of people. Oh.
Lilian?
Yes.
Yeah, Peter, just given the time that any participant can comment on this, I would like to comment on John's comment. I fully agree. I mean, hope, permanent values, spirituality, deepness are words that are being very important in this pandemic. The resiliency of our professors, our students. I'm pretty sure that we are more mature today than 6 months ago or than a year ago as a human beings, as a world, as a communities, as a universities. We face big issues, big problems, and we can see the best of the human being. Sometimes we see something that is very small and we have to fight against that in our interior person. But the generosity, the solidarity, to think about what the other guy or the other person is thinking, to put ourselves in the other part of the person, I guess is something that we are going to take with us, and we're going to take as a community. So my perspective is very optimistic for the future, although I know that the fight against coronavirus is just starting. We have a lot of issues with the vaccine, with the immunization, with the prevention, with the education. But as a human beings, I guess we are learning a lot in our interior soul, and that's why I fully agree with John in regards to that comment. Thank you, Lily.
Thank you, Rector Sanchez. And I would like to touch bases with another group of questions that very much relates with how can we, if you can expand on the ideas for a new economic model for research-intensive universities, if you can deepen on how to effectively embrace new models of micro distributed, extended, just-in-time learning, what should be the priorities on this challenge? Yes, Ferrer.
I'm going to try and avoid the question on economics because it's been 4 years since I looked at a university balance sheet. Since I became almost 21, and I'm aware that there are people in this conversation who are far more able to answer this question. Perhaps I'd just say I know what we did very, very poorly in Ireland, which was after the 2008 recession, to pull huge amounts of money out of our universities and really to hope that international students would make up the shortfall. And this has happened across the world, and you see the huge issue in the Australian universities whose governments said the same thing. If you want extra money, you bring that money in with international students. And now almost the huge issues that are facing them. But it's really about getting back to national importance of higher education. But as I say, there are people much better able to answer that question. About micro credentials, I think this is one of the issues that will be very transformative in higher education. And it's how people will, and I think, Peter, you are right, it's how people will access universities and will need not just to come for the traditional blocks of qualifications that we're used to giving out, but will need to come back for retraining, who will need, particularly as technology ramps up, will need to come back and change the way they work and need to come back for 6 months or 3 months. And we need to be able in the university to be much more agile about
I'm so sorry, Burberry.
No worries, no worries. But how we really offer credentials to students parts of learning. And the other issue is to think about how there are going to be competitors to universities. Industry is going to come up as trainers, particularly trainers in the workplace, and perhaps try and fill that gap of those short-term opportunities. And also just commercial training firms and universities need to be fast on their feet to make sure that they're able to be fast, to be agile and change the way they teach so that we literally don't get our business stolen away from us.
Yes, Peter. Thank you, Burberry.
I'm sorry, I don't want to dominate, but I just would like to reply to Barbara. I think this is you're completely right. My concern is, and I'm not talking about University 21 or even our colleagues here globally. Deborah, do you think that the university community are ready to do what you've just said? Or what do we need to help them, from UNESCO's point of view, for example, to do exactly what you've just said? I don't know. What's the answer?
Yeah. So you can go ahead, Burberry, if you would like to answer.
I'm beginning to bore myself. Yes, I think universities are ready. And I think actually one of the answer to a previous question is also using students as co-creators of knowledge. One thing we haven't mentioned yet here today, the Sustainable Development Goals. And if you look at how the younger generation really are committed and burning to do something about that and have a great passion and vision about how to right wrongs and deal with our planet and our whole community, our whole universe, is bring them in to try and be part of teaching. And where I've seen that is where I have seen students come in and work with us in U21 to pitch projects, to be able to really think of their own ideas. They are so impressive. And it is really, sometimes it's just about, it does take a crisis to change that. And I think you're right before to say this is a crisis that will change the way people think. I don't think it'll just be online, but I think if we go back to our students and particularly what they can teach us and use that becomes a real good driving force.
Thank you, Burberry. I would like to ask Chancellor May or Father Jenkins if you would like to add to the previous question that Peter made from UNESCO. What is the support that we need from them at the different universities?
I think that Barbie answered it well. I think the universities, by and large, we need to do whatever we can to reinforce among the stakeholders that we serve the value of the university and the return on the investment of the university, and the fact that the support that we get and need is multiplied in society, in our contributions to society. Those are not just the obvious contributions of educating our populace, but the sort of the secondary contributions of economic development and providing a vision for the future that can be used and executed on. I think here, certainly in the US, we've faced challenges recently with people questioning the true value of the university, and is it worth all the money that we're paying, and maybe we can do this better by doing it remotely. And those are all relevant questions to ask, but I think we've been somewhat complacent in our response to some of those questions. I think we take for granted that people will always want and need the traditional university. And I think we should not be so complacent. I think pandemic has illustrated that there are different methods and mechanisms available for us to perform our mission. And we should take advantage of what we have learned from this. And these, rather than sort of going back to the way it was after the vaccine is established or produced, I think we should think about ways that remote learning can inform in-person learning and vice versa, and improve what we're doing and what we're offering, improve our value to our stakeholders and to society in that way. Even something as mundane as the use of space. The classrooms have to be used in the traditional way now that we know that we can do some of this remote learning. Do we even need classrooms? Should that space be used for demonstrations and discussion and project-based approaches rather than lectures? And not just the educational space, but the business space in the university, the office space, the laboratory space. Are all those things being used optimally well now that we know that we can use other mechanisms to achieve some of these goals? So there's a lot of I think fruitful ground for us to establish and to cover now that we know that we can do these things in different ways.
Yeah, Peter, I'd echo what was said. I'd add a very pedestrian, non-visionary point is that a lot depends on the market. You know, we, in business, in law, we have programs like that because there are people whose companies are there willing to pay for a short course or certificate. In some area, they need expertise, and we're doing that. We're happy to do it because it brings in revenue. Now, in other areas, that the revenue isn't there. So, what can UNESCO do? I mean, look, tell us what you think will work. We're a private, you know, we don't get public funding, my university. So, you know, we have to find a way to fund it. So if there were a way, and if there were a specific need, I think most universities would jump at the chance to do something creative.
Lily?
Mr. Sanchez?
Yeah. Well, at least in Chile, we could not imagine what will be the situation of this pandemic if in the past we were not investing in universities. Actually, all the internet network in Chile was developed by universities. 95% of the research is done by universities in our country. So I fully agree with Barbara and with the Irish experience that as much as you need the country to cope with the situation, much more investing and much more money you have to put in science, in research, in education. In education, for sure, in primary education, but also in higher education, where you are going to see changes in regards to research, transference, innovation. This is something that we are facing now, probably in every country, but in our country as well, in the sense that for the shortage of money that the government is facing, sometimes one of the cuts are in research and in education, thinking that we can import science, which is completely wrong, because science has to be developed in their own country, has to be faced and adapt to the current situation that the countries face. Just imagine that if we will have a quicker response a few years back with the salmon industry, with vaccines against the virus into the salmons, the reality of our salmon industry has been or should be different in the past. And then we don't know what is going to happen with our manufacturers, with the copper, with the lithium, with the batteries, with so many issues that we have to face. So seminars like this, and I hope that this is going to be presented in the newspapers, in the media, has to show that from our university side, we think that it's crucial to invest and to give trust to the researchers and to the universities in order to build a new world, in order to build a new reality for each of our communities. Thank you, Lily.
Thank you, Rector Sanchez. And regarding what you just mentioned in terms of research and how universities have to work maybe closer with industries, can you give us more ideas on that topic? How can we actually promote from a research perspective, staying connected with that part also from society, industry?
I think our research needs to be use-inspired. I mean, we can't stick only to the very abstract and esoteric concepts that may be of interest to us, but not of particular application with no particular application in mind. Those things are important. Discovery is important for sure, but we have to think about work that we can do that's in the so-called Pasteur's quadrant, where it not only expands knowledge, but it also finds some application to society, whether it be in a business sense or just in a value sense to the people that we serve.
Thank you, Chancellor May. Father Jenkins?
Yeah, I just add to that we're doing something now with data analytics, and there just needs to be a lot of conversations about what the needs of industry are and what universities do. Businesses and universities often have different timelines and kind of different methods, and we're fine. We found, I think we'll be successful here, but there needs to be a process of understanding and appreciation to make that fruitful. I think it's, as Chancellor Mills said, is very promising, but needs some work to till the ground, as it were, to make it fruitful.
And Professor Redmond, maybe you that you have a view from different universities. What's your opinion on that regards?
Yeah, I think it's not an either or. And I think it's about a really good, strong and open dialogue with industry and the university. I should be really interested to hear from UC Davis about, because of your, and it's been in the question box as well, your really stellar standing as a university for veterinary science and for agriculture. And I come from an agricultural country as well, but that the real importance of working with the agricultural industry and also your work there. I maybe come back afterwards, but I'd really like to hear more from Davis on that.
Well, thank you, Barbara. There's a number of dimensions to that question. I think certainly the obvious food production of food is necessary, and we found that the fragility of the supply chain is an important issue to consider during times like this. And not only do we need to produce the necessary food, but make sure that it's able to get safely to the marketplace, which people take that sort of for granted as an obvious thing, but it's not as straightforward as you might consider. The other piece is the health and the productivity of the workers in the agricultural industry. And we found that particularly in the Central Valley in California, these workers from these same disadvantaged communities that we talked about earlier in the presentation are much more susceptible to the virus, and that impacts their ability to be productive and to do the harvest and all the things that are going to be important to keeping the food on our tables, but also keeping the economy strong. So all these issues are issues that we are intimately involved in with research and with providing suggested recommendations on how to optimize the system to overcome some of these challenges.
Thank you, Chancellor May. Rector Sanchez?
Yes, well, I would like to congratulate Barbara because through U21, she has been a tremendous leader in joining initiatives. In regards to research, what we can do as 1, 2, or 3 universities completely different when we work as a network. And we have very good experiences with Notre Dame. I guess we have more than 20 initiatives, combined initiatives in research, in astronomy, in history, in political science, in so many different issues. So although collaboration between universities has been a traditional aspect between our universities and our institutions, pandemic, I guess, put the word collaboration, international collaboration, much more on the table, and groups like U21, I guess we have special special opportunities, let's say in regards to PhD programs. How do we learn between different programs from one to the next one? Early researchers, how much we have been learning for the research career. And also what Gary was saying about transference, because our research has public engagement, public compromise. And the best thing to give back to society is through research, innovation, and transference, through patents, through licensing, through showing the population that the money that we are receiving is the money that we are giving back with the value of the transference coming from research. Thank you, Lily.
Thank you, Rector Sanchez. And I would like to go a little bit back to questions regarding models for teaching. We have been discussing about research. We have been discussing about economic models for confronting this situation. We have been talking about how to build community. And there was a question from the beginning in terms of how we can think about new ways or new models for teaching. And our Vice President for Academic Affairs said, I have a question about the future of in-person or face-to-face teaching beyond the pandemic, but not just in terms of remote learning. I'm thinking of new ways to conceive on-campus interactions among professors and students and the community in general. If you can comment on that. Yes, Barbara.
Yes, I think that's a really good, and welcome to Fernando, because he's just about to join our U21 education leaders. I think that it isn't just, do they come to university or do we teach them online? I do believe that students seek to be together, and that being together is part of their learning. And in many of our universities, what we're seeing is that they're bringing students online, not necessarily for classes, but so that they can be online, they can be on campus and experience being there together, while keeping them safe, having that experience of being a university student. And I think it's part of that actually becomes a deep, transformative experience for particularly for young people who come onto campus. I think we have to be cleverer about how we teach. I think that the notion of filling students' heads with knowledge and then hoping they're just going to learn has never really worked terribly well. And how we really use our classrooms to challenge our students to work project-based learning, if we're using blended learning, to make sure it's done in the most effective way, that when they come into face-to-face contact with their teachers and their other students, that pedagogically they're ready to learn best. And I think that's about good teaching and good approaches to teaching. I also think we have to reimagine, again, going back to the sort of building of qualifications, that we may need to think about students gaining building blocks of qualifications. And some of those building blocks may be online, some of them may be face-to-face, some of them may be virtual internships, some of them may be volunteer activity. And one of the things, we did a very large piece of research in U21 last year, and we looked at the impact of students who physically went abroad to students who did on-campus activities, and to see which of those activities had transformative effects on them in their whole development as people and awareness of themselves as citizens and learners going forward. And what we discovered is that where students are worked with effectively after an activity, be it a trip abroad or be it something that they do in their own community, where they're given the space to reflect and really analyze what that experience meant to them and how it has changed them fundamentally. Where that happened, it didn't make a difference whether the students actually went abroad or whether they had an experience at home. It was about allowing them that period of reflection and analysis. And if we can build that into our teaching, where we really challenge our students to look at the changes that are before them, how they are changing, how things impact on them, that then we really round them out and grow them as full human beings. And that answers the question about being able to deal with disappointment, being able to deal with the hardness of life. But if we can do that, but that has to be done well. And it's not done through a reflective journal. It's done through actual face-to-face and working with students in that way.
If I
Father
could,
Jenkins.
I'll just follow up on that. I read research, and it's been a few years, so it's a little vague, but I think the gist of it was, and this is to follow up on what Ferrer was saying, the gist of it was that a critical factor in both the satisfaction a student has with his or her education and success is that some professor in that person's time took a personal interest in that student, commented on their strengths, helped them to kind of develop whatever talents, and kind of got personally invested in them. And could we do that virtually rather than in person? You know, I'm open to it. Let's try it. But I think it's more than just putting a camera in a room and having a professor talk. There's got to be some way in which those personal relations can be built, and that personal interest in the individual student could be manifest, which is so, I just think it's so critical insofar as our education is transformative and really allows a student to flourish. It's because of that personal interest. It's not the case that every professor has to have that interest, but some professor has to have interest in each student, and different ones will relate to different students. But I think that's critical. Could we do that virtually? Let's see. I mean, I'm open to it, but we just can't lose that personal dimension of education.
Thank you, Father Jenkins. Rector Sanchez, you wanted to add something to that?
Yeah, and then I guess Peter wanted to say something on this. No, I mean, I have been talking to many students, and although they agree in that this remote learning has been okay for the issue that we are facing, I guess everyone says that there's nothing like the personal contact. There's nothing like the live in campus. There is nothing like to share with the students and professors the view of university. So I guess one extra value of this pandemic as well is to put in a priority what important is to share personal ideas, to be in touch with people, and to see to the face, to the eyes when we are talking about it. It is clear that this seminar is only possible because we have this technological help. It is very tough to invite many distinguished professors and leaders for a week or for a few days into Chile. So we are very grateful to have this frame and this technology, but how important is to value the importance of the personal touch, the discussion in live. I guess particularly the students are very grateful, and they recognize the value of that. And this is something that we're going to keep for the future as well, to take care about our relationship, to take care about the sense of community, to care about how we can be how much we have been built in each community about the sense of university. Peter?
Your microphone, yes.
Thank you very much, Professor. Yes, I've been listening very carefully to all of the interventions, and I just made a little bit of a comment in the chat function. You know, I think it's really all about ensuring the quality of the teaching and learning. And it really shouldn't matter, in my opinion, it shouldn't matter whether the teaching takes place online or on campus. And this comes down to the quality assurance aspect, which I know is a different discussion, but still. I think if I'm a good teacher, I can do this online and I can do this on campus. But if my teaching is not very good or my assessment procedures are not very good, it will be just as poor online as it will be on campus. But what I think is really changed, and I come back to what I said before, I think what's really changed during this unprecedented situation we have had is that teachers and professors who previously thought they couldn't do it now realize they can, because they've been forced to do it. What they need now, and I think this is one of the things that we should really concentrate on, is how to support professors and teachers to improve and help them put courses up online, do assessments online, because they've had to run at it when and if they can, completely overnight and pretty much in the dark. They didn't know what to do. They just did whatever they could, and they've been absolutely phenomenal in doing this. And actually it kind of worked, but what they want is a little bit of support now to say, well, how can we do this? How can we make it better? Because we now know we can do it, but we need to do it better. Be it online teaching, using the uses of education technologies or usage of online assessments, all of those that can, and let's not forget there's been many universities and professors and teachers around the world that couldn't do this because of technology was not available, connectivity wasn't available, but we can help them do this better in the future. And I think that's what we really need to focus on now, is supporting the faculty, the teachers, the professors to be able to do this. Okay, I'll leave it there. I'm getting a bit over the top.
Thank you, Peter. I'm not sure if Chancellor May would like to add something to that.
I don't necessarily have much to add. I think much has been said, has been very wise and useful. I do think that, as Peter just said, we have a situation where our faculty who may have previously been reluctant to use these tools now have been sort of thrown into the arena and forced to. And some of them have had aha moments where they said, wow, this is not so bad, and this can be useful, and I can find a way to work this tool into my in my teaching, my traditional teaching, and enhance it. And we don't want to lose this moment where they've started to have some acceptance. And as I said earlier, I think there are ways that the online vehicle can enhance the in-person learning, and the in-person learning can also enhance the online. And we should focus on those cooperative ways of teaching and learning going forward. And I think this is one of the silver linings that has revealed itself through the pandemic.
Thank you, Chancellor May. And I would like to ask a question from our Vice President for Research. What are the challenges or strategies you visualize for our internal communication to address these complex issues, particularly related to regression and recovery phases, the dilemma between certainty and uncertainty, balance between risk taking and research activity, and so forth? If you can comment on that and how you're dealing with it in your different institutions. February?
I think one thing is not to expect that people will recover in a linear fashion, that they will have had a hard time and then they will get over it and be better. That really we're into much more series of circles of difficulties, particularly as the virus change. The virus so affects how we feel at the moment, regardless of anything we have to do in universities. And I think I was talking to our colleagues in Auckland over the weekend, and their enormous disappointment of having been 100 days without a new community case and now having cases, that really feeling it's like, you know, the child's game of snakes and ladders, where you hit a snake and you go back to the beginning again. And it's about really helping people understand that people will have very bad days and accepting that, and our students will have very bad days as well. A cohort I have particular concerns about are, and I know this for Pedro, our PhD students and our young career researchers, because I think the pandemic plus the lack of travel is a very difficult combination for them, plus dropping a university finances. And if we're to have that vision, and that Ignacio was talking about, of the importance of university research and the role that universities have played in training health service professionals, in training the front line, and in that life-saving scientific research. If we're to do that, we have to bring up the next generation of researchers. And I think they're the ones that may be really feeling particularly lonely at the moment. And it's something we need to think about how we support them, and how networks like ours and other groupings support our young researchers, and how we bring them together in whatever way we can.
Thank you, Beatriz.
Lilia?
Rector Sanchez?
Yeah, shortly, because we are running ahead on the time, but I guess the virus is a call for interdiscipline. As the virus is hitting us, is asking the universities to work between different disciplines to give more complete and comprehensive answers. And as Professor Bouchon was proposing, this broad answer, it has to come from different disciplines, and we are learning more and more how to work between different views, between different disciplines. Every time that I ask a chancellor or a president what are the more difficult aspects of running the universities, to put force and to enhance the interdiscipline. I guess this pandemic is putting much more effort on this answer from our side.
Thank you, Rector Sanchez. Chancellor May?
I think the rector is exactly right. And I mentioned in my opening remarks, we've had a wonderful opportunity for not only our experts in medicine and public health to work on this, but also in engineering and in chemistry and genetics and public policy and some of the other economics, some of the other disciplines that we find the solutions to some of the challenges of the virus are holistic in nature. I think people, many people with different expertise can contribute to those solutions. And we need to find a way to allow them to do that. The virus does not care what discipline we are, it does not care about borders. The virus is pretty indiscriminate in its effects. So we have to take the same approach in our efforts to combat it.
Thank you, Chancellor May. Father Jenkins?
I don't have much to add to that, except I do think the problems I see in my country in dealing with this is precisely that inability to think across disciplines. You know, the epidemiologist with one answer, the economist with another answer, and the politicians with another answer. I just couldn't agree with Rector Sanchez more that we have to learn to see things comprehensively, and that's interdisciplinary with interdisciplinarity. So that's all I have to add.
Thank you. And we're approaching the end of our seminar. I would like to give a minute for each of you if you would like to have some closing marks before finishing. Maybe we can follow the same order as you did the presentations. Maybe Chancellor May, if you would like to make your final comments, suggestions, ideas.
Sure. Thank you very much again, Lydia, and I'll be brief. I just want to tell you how much I appreciate this opportunity to be with you this morning and to share ideas. And this pandemic has illustrated to me more strongly than ever the importance of global collaboration and partnership. And seminars like this are an artifact of that need for collaboration. I think that we at UC Davis have benefited greatly from our partnership with the various universities represented here. We hope to continue to benefit in that way. And I look forward to the opportunity and hopefully the near future where we can all gather together, not just on a TV screen, but together and physically and in person. So thank you again.
Thank you, Chancellor May. Burberry?
Thank you. I think one of the things that has always got me through dark days in 40 years of academia is how great students are. At times they drive you mad, but most of the time they pleasantly surprise you in how great they are. And I really think it's about getting them through these days, making sure we teach them well, whatever way we do it, and absolutely train our teachers better, support our teachers, but believe in them because they're the people who are going to really take us to the next phase that we need to. But I think that they have strength and resilience, and if we can help them through that, that's really that's kind of the star we need to follow in these days.
Thank you, Burberry. Father Jenkins?
Well, I want to thank the Pontificia Universidad de Chile, Católica de Chile, for bringing us together. I mean, we're so divided at this time by this virus and the pandemic, and here we are across the world having a conversation. And what a wonderful service you have done, Ignacio, to bring this group together and have a conversation at this difficult time. I just think that the kind of connections are ever more important to hold to and to cultivate now more than ever. And so thank you for that. I just echo the point about the students. It is about the students, and they're the future. And there have been difficult things in human history before: viruses, wars, economic catastrophe, and it takes a resilience, a courage, a sense of vision to get through them, and this requires it as well. And this is our time, and this is our challenge. And I just think universities are just critical for every aspect of our response to this pandemic and trying to discern the future. So this is a great conversation. I'm deeply grateful and honored to be part of it. And thanks to all our listeners for listening to us. And thanks to you, UC, for hosting it.
Thank you, Father Jenkins. Peter?
Thank you, Liliane, and thank you also to the university and all of the panelists for allowing me to take part in this today. And also thank you to all those people I can see here on the screen who are listening in and hopefully getting something out of this. You know what I really want to say? I think it's all about being, I'm a bit dark, there we go. It's all about being, I think we need to all believe that things will get better, that higher education will improve, higher education will learn from this. And I really believe this is a game-changing moment. It's what I said earlier. I know there are challenges, I know there are disruptions, but disruption is what it's all about. So yes, as Father said, we are divided, but we are together, and we have learned so much as a higher education community from this about what we can do and what we can't do, but what we can do to change. So I think this is the most positive thing that could happen to higher education. And I'm very, very honored to have been able to take part in this discussion today on behalf of UNESCO and my colleague Paz, who you can see here. So thank you so much to everybody.
Thanks to you, Peter. Rector Sanchez?
Yeah, well, thank you so much to Gary, John, Peter, Barbara. This has been a wonderful discussion, very deep and profound. I would like to mention that it was focused on student and new knowledgement. And both areas are the key issue from the universities, how to give a transformation from our students in order to give them the best opportunities to growth, and in order to know more about knowledgement in order to serve better society. We were saying that collaboration, empathy, flexibility, resiliency, key words in pandemia. I will add generosity. I mean, Gary, it was 6 a.m. in the morning when we started this seminar. Generosity, we are receiving your time, and friendship. I guess we feel closer. We feel that we are engaged in emotional and in more spiritual values. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for the testimony that you are giving us to all this Superior Council that is added with so many professors and so many professionals that are giving the best for our university. We are almost 100 persons in this seminar, and I guess it has been a very, very good and fruitful time. Thank you.
Well, thank you to all our panelists. We really appreciate all your ideas, your thoughts, everything you shared this morning. I tried to put together like a little paragraph with different ideas that emerged from the conversation. We are confronted today with the hardness of life, but we are called to be positive. We need to get together to confront global challenges and provide with a transformative experience in higher education. We need to create with the community as the basis. We need to be creative in the co-creation of knowledge, acknowledge that we have the best sources with us, our students. We need to ensure the quality of teaching and learning. We're all together in this, and a priority seems to stay connected and be in touch. So we really thank all the panelists, we thank all the attendees, and we're really looking forward to see you all, hopefully face-to-face in the near future. So stay healthy and stay in touch. Thanks to everybody.
Thank you, Lillian.
Thank you, John,
Bye.
Peter.